It's an evolutionary, brand new industry that a lot of people are not really sure where it fits anyway, much less in the context of climate discussions. And like I've been saying for a long time, this is not in even response to what Trump was talking about climate, but human civilization needs to live inside the carbon cycle, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum. And some of these technologies are really ingenious. So I believe that that's going to win the day. And the sort of the moral argument around climate may or may not be that persuasive for some, but I think the business case is.
Carbonsations. Today's carbon industry leaders.
Are you passionate about climate action and staying on top of the latest trends in the world of carbon capture, removal, and markets? Then the Carbon Herald has you covered. Every week, we bring you the top news, breakthroughs, and insights from the world of carbon management, delivered straight to your inbox. No fluff, no jargon, just the essential info you need to stay informed. So whether you're a climate professional or just someone who cares, make sure you're subscribed. Visit carbonherald.com and sign up today for our weekly newsletter. Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. Today we're joined by Leila Conners, film director and founder of Tree Media Group. Leila has directed several impactful documentaries about the state of the natural environment and how we as a society interact with it. Notable titles include The 11th Hour, Ice on Fire, and most recently, Legion 44, a film dedicated to carbon removal, which we'll talk more about today. Leila, thank you so much for making the time to be here. It's a real pleasure to have you. Before we get into your work as a film director, though, I was really curious to learn what inspired you to start making movies about climate change and some of the most pressing issues of our time.
Sure. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to speak with your audience. So I come to what I call civilization living inside the carbon cycle through international politics and economics. I studied those things in university and was always interested in how the world works in general and how we all can get along. I'm very oriented towards longevity, peace issues, because I grew up during the Cold War and the building up of nuclear capabilities between the Soviet Union and the United States. It was a terrifying time. And so I think a lot of us in that generation really look towards peace as the goal. When the Cold War ended, he said, now that we have dealt with the nuclear threat, the next big thing is the environment. And so I was very interested in why he was saying that. And so that was back in the, early 90s, I would say. So I came to the environment from that perspective because he had said that the environment is where cooperation can happen, global cooperation, as well as where some of the big threats lie. And so that's how I got involved.
Okay, and so moving on to one of your most famous films, The 11th Hour, which was co-written and co-produced by Leonardo DiCaprio. The movie was made almost 2 decades ago, but back when climate change was nowhere near as broadly recognized as it is today. What can you share about the process of making this movie? Whose idea was it? Was it difficult to get people on board with it at the time? Just what was it like?
Well, it was back to the same sort of spirit of what I was saying. At the time, Leonardo was interested in the environment. And so he had a website, and the web was really just beginning. There was really nothing that we have today. It wasn't like there were no iPhones in the way we have them now. There was even video on the web was very new. We were actually the first ones to hack Flash, to put video on the web publicly. And so we decided at that time to interview scientists in all aspects of Earth's system. So, oceans, water, deserts, forests, you name it, right? And we asked them about the state of the world. It was really about, let's just do a check-in to see how we're doing. And in that process, we learned about climate, and we learned about how climate and the change in climate was impacting all of these ecosystems. And so we interviewed something like 70 scientists, and it was really meant to be for the website, just put the interviews online. But somewhere in that process, which was like a 3 to 5 year process, we decided to sort of take some of the interviews and turn it into a movie, which is why 11th Hour has that blue backdrop and everyone's in the same setting. It was meant to be more of a web educational activity. And then we turned it into a movie. And so there you go. That's how that happened.
All right. So on that note, the follow-up, sort of, I don't know if it's right to call it that, to the 11th Hour, your arguably more successful film, Ice on Fire, deals with similar issues, but with a focus on methane. How was that experience different to making the first film?
Well, like I said, Ice was meant to be a film from the beginning. And so if you have a budget for a movie, then you make a really good movie. so that's basically the difference between 11th and Ice. Ice was meant to be that. And what was interesting about Ice on Fire is that HBO is at the time, a phenomenal studio to work with. So they gave us a budget that was, good enough to let us travel and go around and see what the methane threat actually was. And also, in the middle of filming that was when Christophe and Jan from Climeworks launched their Himwell plant. And I was interested in carbon removal from the early 2000s because we became aware of Klaus Lackner's mechanical tree idea, I think literally in 2000. And so we had interviewed Klaus in his lab in Arizona. And as we were contemplating that, Christophe and Jan post on Facebook their big plan. I said, I can't believe the implementation scaled like that. So in the middle of Ice on Fire, that emerged, and I thought that would be a perfect addition to the movie because the methane discussion is pretty depressing if you really go into that feedback loop. That becomes quite frightening. And not a lot of people really like to address the methane issue. And that's what the point of Ice was. As you can see, we talk about the disassociation of the methane in the Arctic. But what's interesting about that is that the Tromsø group, and I think a lot of people who are in the methane world, are not entirely clear how it is not definitive yet, where the methane is coming from, if, methanotropic bacteria eat it or not, if it, I know it's reaching the surface of the ocean, but, that's very, very, very unclear still. And even like some scientists are like, perhaps the Earth can metabolize 50% more. Obviously, that doesn't mean we should just go burn more everything. But no, it's one of those tipping points you don't want to toy with. Let's just put it that way. And Ice, I think, makes that pretty clear.
Yeah, and since you mentioned that's when you kind of got deeper into carbon removal after finding out about Climeworks, is that when the idea for Legion 44 kind of came about, or what was that process like?
No, Legion is an interesting one because Ice came out in 2019. We were in Cannes International Film Festival in May, and then in September we came out on HBO. And then, if everyone remembers, there was something called a pandemic. 2020 is not funny at all, but 2020, the pandemic started. And so the natural flow of this film is kind of an impact film, sort of went underground because we couldn't do our community screenings. We couldn't really, everyone was reeling from what it meant to have a pandemic. And so Ice became that which one saw only online or on the air. I still see it on airlines. It's kind of nice. Legion was result of two young people calling me, Paulina and Fabian, to revisit CDR because they said there's been no CDR movie just on CDR. And it is true. I said, yeah, I should go and see whatever happened to Climeworks, what happened to all of these are there any other companies? And to my surprise, and that was, I think, what, Legion does well, is show this sort of spontaneous emergence. Like, so in the middle of this pandemic that we had, the CDR industry rose. out of, what one would think nowhere. Of course, it's not nowhere because all these engineers were working in their postdocs and their PhDs and their undergrad, and, they were all looking at it. But from an outsider's point of view, it was almost as if it was a spontaneous emergence, So that's basically what Legion shows is all of these young engineers from around the world attacking this problem, which I find really heartening.
So from your work, like interviewing all these different carbon removal companies, what impressions were you left with? Like, is this a solution that's really viable? How viable is it? Like, how far away are we from reaching any kind of meaningful scale? What are your impressions, like as a filmmaker, from someone from the outside looking in, basically?
Well, basically, my impression is it's a group of very intelligent people that are thinking through all of the issues at a granular level with an eye for huge scale, right? So I am very impressed with this group of people because they have a lot of care around social justice, around impact from their activities. When someone says, oh, the CDR industry, they're going to make, if some people think it creates harm or whatever, I say, you haven't met these people. They know more about their impact than you would ever know. They that's all they're doing is like, will my activity net remove carbon? Will it, generate more carbon than removal? Obviously, if we're generating more carbon than we remove, then we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. So they're very clear on the science when it's clear to them. So they're doing a lot of testing, they're doing a lot of piloting, they're doing a lot of what we call monitoring, reporting, and verification, which is called MRV in the industry, which is where does a carbon molecule go from the sky into the ground? And of course, there's all these different pathways, right? You have enhanced rock weathering, you have ocean alkalinity enhancement, you have direct air capture, you have hybrid direct air capture stuff. So there's also, biochar and people are working with algae. And so it's really fascinating. And in terms of the scale, because you asked a bunch of questions in one, but like we're at a place where a lot of the pilots are proving out to be, great. And the secondary tranche of financing is where some of these projects are at. So they do need funding, because we have a chicken and egg problem with the market, because there's still a voluntary market and the market depends on standards, and those standards are still being developed. So we're at an early stage. This is an early stage industry that's really rushing to create all the elements of clarity, transparency around the processes themselves so that the market can be built on top of that. So the scaling potential is there. It's a financing question. And then, we could talk for hours on how we get to that. But I guess I'll leave it there for now.
I think it's also amazing that the film showcases really all these different pathways to CDR, and aware that we certainly need all of them. But nevertheless, do you have like a favorite or one that you're leaning more towards as opposed to the others?
No, and that's really important for everyone to understand. Every removal pathway has an ideal scenario for itself. So, for example, the Kenyan Rift Valley, we just had our Nairobi screening, which was really thrilling. The Kenyan Rift Valley, or the Rift Valley in Africa, specifically in Kenya, has a lot of basalt rock formations. They have geothermal. They have a need for more demand for electricity so they can expand electricity offerings. So direct air capture is perfect for Kenya, right? It's my favorite for Kenya, but also enhanced rock weathering and biochar is great there. Iceland has geothermal, so they're great for DAC. Farmland is great for ERW or for biochar. So it really, and then of course there's the oceans, the sinking of the seaweed, there's the OAE. So there really is no favorite, nor should we lean in on any one, because like I say, it depends where you are. So if you're interested in CDR, it's important that you learn about, what are the local conditions from where you sit, which one of these pathways works best. And for more of that, you can go to our website, legion44.world, and watch it and learn about it. We have all the resources there.
For sure, we'll include a link for that in the description. From the different places that you got to visit, have you seen any places where there's more support for carbon removal as opposed to others?
Again, I haven't canvassed the entire world, but from where like you said, from where I sit, there are places that are more suspicious of carbon removal, and it happens to be, strangely enough, places that are in America specifically that are consider themselves very environmental. So, for example, the state of New York, which has the 2019 climate bill, bans burning, so they consider pyrolysis burning, and so we can't really grow a hefty biochar industry in New York right now. There's also concerns around DAC and pipelines, which is sort of if you go to Kenya or Iceland, there's no pipeline going that far. So it just depends on, again, where you are. So Kenya looks like they're going to put some laws in that will be favorable. Singapore is looking at that too. Luxembourg is going to do a big screening with the intent to look at that for Luxembourg. So it really is very granular. Where and that to me just is it's really anecdotal on my end. It turns out that Denmark and Germany have set great target, so they are leaders in the space. But policy is slow. So it's going to have to do a lot of catch up.
Yeah, about that, actually. I was curious to learn your opinion about the current political situation in the US and how that's impacting CDR. A lot of folks are worried that it might actually pull the brakes on the DAC hubs and other things that were set in motion during the Biden administration, and now we're kind of in jeopardy. What's your view on that? How's the situation developing currently? Do you share these worries?
Well, it's early days. I mean, there have been people that have been let go in the DOE, but apparently there's other CDR people still in the bureaucracy, active and working. I just heard that there's some project in California that's staying in place. I think it was a BEX project. So I think it's going to be piecemeal, project by project. But it's really early days. And the one thing that I think CDR has going for it is that it's a job provider. It's also future-oriented and very innovative. It's defossilizing and localizing carbon inputs, which is, for any industry, extremely interesting. So I'm pretty sure that on the long term is more important than the rhetoric around the word carbon. The other thing I would say here is, yes, there are private investors that I know have pulled their money out of the United States and gone elsewhere because there's too much uncertainty. So, of course, that's going to impact American projects. It's also an opportunity because, remember, when there's a vacuum, someone will always fill it. So it's an opportunity for other countries to step forward and take leadership. So, we know how future materials will be made, and it will be how energy is made in many cases. And if you look at BEX and if you look at biochar and what that can do and some DAC. So it's an evolutionary, brand new industry that a lot of people are not really sure where it fits anyway, much less in the context of climate discussions. And like I've been saying for a long time, this is not in even response to what Trump was talking about climate, but human civilization needs to live inside the carbon cycle, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum. And some of these technologies are really ingenious. So I believe that that's going to win the day. And the moral argument around climate may or may not be that persuasive for some, but I think the business case is.
So to kind of sum that up, do you think CDR has a chance of surviving without necessarily getting the necessary political support?
It's a hard question to answer because in sum is a really tricky one there. We're living in an era of complexity and nuance. So I'm not going to sum up. What I'm saying is that the technology and the innovation is extremely attractive. And so if people are functioning in that headspace, it's going to be fine. If it's just going to be shut down because the word carbon is in it, then yeah, it doesn't look good. But I don't know how it's going to play out.
Speaking of business case, by the way, Leila, I'm very curious to know whether you had any chance to study or gather opinions on the carbon markets over the years, because many view them as the only tool carbon removal has at its disposal to be able to scale. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, again, it's all around compliance and voluntarism, right? So can we get there through voluntary action or not? Most people would say probably not, although regulation and compliance pisses certain people off, let's just say. So markets, if they provide value, of course, will drive change. That's how the corporate world works, and how a lot of impact happens. So there is no question that there needs to be a maturing market for these removal credits. The question really becomes, now remember, we have carbon capture and sequestration, which is like the removal credit. And then you have, which is different than a permission to pollute credit. So Anu Khan in the movie really goes deep into what the difference is. Then you also have carbon capture and utilization, which is defossilizing the industrial world in the process of making materials and fuels. So there's two different parts of this, right? So some of these companies may be making materials while also sequestering carbon, and that may allow them to exist without markets, right? Because their real main product is, for example, making, in this one case with Brilliant Planet beta carotene or magnetic sand, or, in the case of sea fields, you could do biofuels. So it's complicated also, and it's also early days. So obviously, a lot of them would appreciate a mature market. It's just not present yet. But there will be removal trading regimes. There are some now, but they're not fully in place.
Since you mentioned carbon capture, I'm curious about your opinion about it. Do you see it as being effective? Do we need it as much? Should there be a bigger effort on carbon removal as opposed to capture? Well, how do you see this?
How do you differentiate carbon capture from carbon removal?
Carbon capture as like point source carbon capture.
Oh, point source. I mean, that we don't do point source capture blows my mind. And you know why? Because when you have the emissions leaving the stack, the concentration is so high right at the stack that it's a lot less energy to capture it and bring it back out of the atmosphere. So why wouldn't you do that?
It's simply ineffective. And people or companies, major oil companies, not going to drop any names, have been caught in over exaggerating the amount that they actually capture.
Right. So we were in Iceland. They do point source capture in their aluminum business. I would think that regardless of whatever companies are doing, the fact that because there are some bad actors, you eliminate the concept altogether, I think is a mistake. You should and capture all emissions at source, because otherwise then you have to scrub it from the atmosphere. And for the audience, 400 parts per million is 400 orange ping pong balls in a million white ping pong ball bin, So you have to sort through a million white ping pong balls to find 400 of these. If you're at source, it's all orange ping pong balls. You just grab it right there. So, I think it's old thinking. This permission to pollute argument has basically ground to a halt a lot of innovation, and it also, doesn't speak to human behavior. I mean, basically right now, regardless of what everyone thinks about permission to pollute, the pollution is still happening. So you're going to just let the pollution go up in the sky just because you're worried that someone is lying about it. I don't know. I would put a filter on every single stack in the world. That would be fantastic.
Interestingly, I don't think there are any documentaries about carbon capture out there. So maybe that's also an idea worth considering.
Yeah, no, I know. It is definitely. I actually have already a really great interview with the CEO, the Icelandic CEO. She's a woman. I can't remember. I think her name's Edda. Sorry, Edda, if it's not your name. But she has the best argument of all. And it's what I just said is based off of my interview with her. It's just like, it makes absolutely no sense to just, oh, because you lied about it, we're just going to pollute more. It makes no sense at all. So yeah, maybe there's a short in there somewhere.
Okay. So on that note, Leila, I've got a final question for you before we wrap up. And that's whether you're working on anything new already. Do you have any exciting new projects planned that you can hint at?
Definitely. We are always, always on to our next project. First of all, we have the Legion 44 movement, which is getting this film out to as many people as possible. And you can watch the film and remove carbon, which is an innovation in film distribution, right? It's actually, there's baked in action in the watch. So the watch also affords people permanent access to the movie with a lot of bonus content that's going to be uploaded. So we're building like a community of watch and remove, which I'm very excited about. The other thing, the next movie is the biochar effect. So we basically realized that biochar, we knew that anyway before, is so complex and so fascinating and really is the key component to what we call a circular economy, where you take the waste and make value out of it. And so we have the biochar effect is in editing actually right now. And then my next one after that is something called Indra's Web, which is about nature removals. So, and probably mostly focusing on trees. And I have my first support coming from, I don't know if I can say who yet. I have to way. But anyway, so that's moving forward. And finally, and not last at all, I'm working with the Hopi people of Southwest United States on a message they want to send the world. They've asked me to help them. And I'm very excited about that. And I'm filming that in September.
Wow. That definitely does sound very exciting. So when can we expect the biochar movie to be out? Do you have a timeline in mind?
That is a great question. I really want it to be out by the end of the year.
Okay.
And it's directed by Matthew Schmid, my partner. And that would be, and I'm producing and editing that one, but I would really like that movie to be done soon. But we're just at the beginning of the edit. So that is really hard to know when you finish a movie. You're in the beginning of an edit, but I'm hoping for the end of the year.
Okay. It's definitely very exciting, very fascinated. And yeah, definitely can't wait to see it when it comes out. Yeah, and I'm certainly looking forward to following up on this interview and then maybe getting to speak to you again once that's out.
Absolutely. We can talk anytime.
I would love to. Leila, thank you so much for the incredible viewing experiences that you create, because it was definitely one of the most beautiful documentaries I've seen. And for your contribution to climate action and for having this lovely conversation today, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much and have a great day or evening.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.